She walked straight toward him, and the entire ballroom went silent. Every head turned, every fan stopped moving. Because no woman in living memory had done what Lady Beatrice Holloway was doing right now, crossing the room toward the Duke of Westmere after her cousin had just announced, loudly enough for 200 people to hear, that Beatrice had claimed she could charm any gentleman in the room. The Duke stood alone near the far window, his expression unreadable, his posture perfectly still. Beatrice's hands were steady, her chin was level, and the only thought in her mind was, "Don't you dare look away first." Before we begin, subscribe to the Duke's Diary and stay with this story until the very end. Drop a comment and tell me which city you are watching from. I want to know how far this story has traveled. The Holloway name had survived 3 generations of bad luck with the particular stubbornness of families who had run out of options and were too proud to admit it. Beatrice Eleanor Holloway understood this, the way she understood most things clearly, without sentiment, and without the comfort of pretending it wasn't true. Her father's estate was not ruined. It was simply in the category of things that required careful management to avoid becoming ruined, which was almost worse, because it meant the crisis was always close enough to feel, but never close enough to resolve in a single afternoon. She had come to the Ashworth Winter Ball for her sister. This was the version she had rehearsed in the carriage on the way over, and it had the advantage of being partially true. Cecily was 19 and beautiful, and desperately in need of the kind of introductions that only an evening like this could provide the right people in the right room, the right name said at the right moment. Beatrice was 26, which in the arithmetic of this particular world meant she was old enough to be useful and young enough to still require managing. She had arrived in a gown that was 3 seasons behind the fashion and told herself it didn't matter. It didn't. She had told herself correctly. What mattered was that Cecily was introduced to Lord Finchley's son before his mother decided the evening was over. What mattered was that their cousin Helena didn't drink too much champagne and say something that would be repeated at breakfast tables for the next 6 weeks. What mattered was that Beatrice herself remained exactly what she always was at these events, pleasant, efficient, and invisible enough that no one felt compelled to make her a subject of conversation. She had been managing this successfully for approximately 45 minutes. Then her cousin Marcus opened his mouth. Marcus Holloway was the kind of man who confused cruelty with wit, primarily because the people around him had never bothered to explain the difference. He was handsome in a way that it had stopped being interesting years ago, all surface, nothing underneath, and he had spent most of the evening holding court near the champagne table, telling stories that required other people's embarrassment to be funny. "There she is," he said when he spotted Beatrice crossing toward the refreshment table. He said it loudly, deliberately, in the particular tone that meant he was performing for an audience he had already assembled. "My cousin Beatrice. She has a theory, you know. She told me once that she could hold a conversation with any man in the room, duke or dairyman, it doesn't matter. She reads people like books, she says." The small circle around him laughed. Beatrice stopped walking. She did not turn immediately. She stood for a moment, with her back to the group, and breathed through the particular heat that rose in her when someone used her own words against her, in public words, she had said in a private moment. Words Marcus had stored like ammunition for exactly this purpose. She turned around. "Marcus," she said, "that is not what I said. You said people are simply books you haven't read yet." He spread his hands with an expression of exaggerated innocence. "I'm paraphrasing, but the spirit is accurate." "The spirit is not accurate," Beatrice said evenly. "And you know it. Then prove it," he said. The champagne glass he lifted was theatrical. Everything about him was theatrical. If you truly understand people the way you claim, prove it. Go introduce yourself to the Duke of Westmere. The laughter that followed was not the laughter of people who found something funny. It was the laughter of people who were relieved the target wasn't them. Beatrice knew Adrian Vale by reputation. Everyone in the county did. He was 35, widowed 4 years ago, and had spent the years since building a reputation for devastating social precision that had left more than one ambitious family quietly licking wounds they refused to name in polite company. He was not cruel in the way Marcus was cruel. He was something worse, intelligent, honest, and entirely without the social instinct to pretend otherwise when something bored or irritated him. She looked toward the far end of the room. He was standing near the tall window, separate from the gathered clusters of guests in the way that some men are separate not because they have been excluded, but because they have placed themselves outside and made the placement so complete that approaching them feels like an act requiring justification. He was watching the room. When she turned to look at him, his eyes had already moved to her. He had been watching the whole thing. "Go on then," Marcus said, behind her. His voice was lighter now, more certain. He had run this kind of thing before. He knew the ending. Or admit that you don't believe your own theory. Beatrice turned back to her cousin. She looked at him for 3 full seconds, long enough to make him uncertain, which was something Marcus rarely was, and which she counted as a small victory. Then she said, "Excuse me." She crossed the room. She did not hurry. Hurrying would have looked like fear, and fear was exactly what Marcus wanted from this, and she had decided at some point in the 30 feet between her cousin and the Duke that she was not going to give her cousin anything he wanted tonight. She walked at the pace of a woman who had decided to walk somewhere, and was walking there. The Duke watched her come. He did not shift his weight, did not adjust his posture, did not do any of the small preparatory things people do when someone is approaching them, and they have feelings about it. He simply stood there and let her come, with the expression of a man who was curious and was not particularly interested in hiding that he was curious. She stopped 2 feet away. She said, "Good evening." "Good evening," he said. His voice was lower than she expected. Not soft low. The difference between those things mattered. "I owe you an apology," she said. Something moved in his expression. "Do you?" "My cousin has just made something of a public announcement about my ability to hold conversations with strangers. I realize that puts you in the awkward position of being the demonstration. I thought you deserved to know that you were selected by someone else, not by me." He looked at her for a moment that was slightly longer than politeness required. "I see," he said. "And what would you have selected if the choice had been yours?" "The refreshment table," Beatrice said. "I had been moving in that direction for 10 minutes. The pause that followed was different from the one before it. Shorter, warmer, not yet anything specific, but no longer simply nothing. "Adrian Vale," he said. He did not say Duke of Westmere. He said his name, which was not the same thing, and she noticed it immediately. "Beatrice Holloway," she said. Not Lady Beatrice, just the name. She wasn't sure why, except that it seemed the right register. "Tell me something, Miss Holloway." He glanced briefly toward the group near the champagne table, where Marcus was watching them with an expression that was trying to decide between satisfaction and confusion. "Your cousin, is he usually this deliberate about his unkindness, or is this evening a particular effort?" Beatrice blinked. It was the last thing she had expected him to say. "He doesn't think of it as unkind," she said after a moment. "He thinks of it as entertainment. Most people who are deliberately unkind in public prefer that framing," the Duke said. His eyes moved back to her. "You are not angry," she said. "I am simply not willing to let him know it, because he would enjoy it." "Because he would enjoy it," she agreed. Something shifted in the Duke's expression, not quite a smile, not yet, but the preparation for one, the faint rearrangement of features that happens just before a face decides what it's about to do. "You may," he said, and there was something deliberate in his tone now, something with an edge of warmth she hadn't anticipated. "Refuse every gentleman here tonight, Miss Holloway. If you find them tiresome." He paused, and the pause had weight to it. "Except me. I'm afraid I've already decided to find you interesting." The silence that followed lasted exactly long enough to matter. Beatrice looked at him. "That," she said, "is the most confident thing anyone has said to me in 3 years." Was it accurate? She considered the question with more seriousness than he had probably expected. "I'll tell you at the end of the evening," she said. He almost smiled. She saw at the very edge of it before it retreated back behind the controlled composure. "Then I suppose," he said, "I need to ensure the evening continues." He moved to stand beside her rather than opposite her, which was a small but deliberate shift, the difference between an interview and a conversation. She registered it without commenting on it. Across the room, Marcus was still watching. His expression had settled on confused, which Beatrice found considerably more satisfying than the satisfaction he'd been aiming for. "Your cousin believed this would end badly for you," the Duke said, without looking at Marcus. "He generally does. He was wrong. He generally is," she said. He simply hasn't accepted the pattern yet. This time the almost smile arrived more fully. Not a laugh. Adrian Vale did not seem like a man who laughed easily, but something genuine, something that reached the corners of his eyes. "How long have you been managing your family's affairs?" he asked. The shift in topic was so precise it took her a half-second to follow it. "Since my father's illness. 3 years without assistance. With significant assistance from our estate manager, who is 64 and knows more about soil drainage than I ever will. With considerably less assistance from everyone else. And this." He gestured toward the room in a way that encompassed not just the ballroom but the entire machinery of an evening like this. The introductions, the positioning, the careful performance of status. "This is part of the management. Tonight specifically is about my sister," Beatrice said. "Cecily is 19. Lord Finchley's son has a respectable income and the good sense to be kind to people who can't help him. You vetted him. I vetted everyone on the guest list who might realistically speak to Cecily before deciding she was worth speaking to." A pause. "That is a more efficient approach to a winter ball than most people employ." "Most people come to winter balls to be seen," Beatrice said. "I come to accomplish specific things and leave before I'm required to pretend I'm enjoying the dancing." He looked at her. Not the way men usually looked at her, measuring her against some catalog of relevant attributes and finding the result either interesting enough to continue or not. He looked at her the way a person looks at something they have unexpectedly understood. "You don't enjoy dancing," he said. "I enjoy dancing," she said. "I don't enjoy dancing as a performance for people who are watching to see if I do it correctly. Those are very different activities." "They are," he agreed, in a tone that suggested he had thought about this before and arrived at the same distinction. From somewhere in the middle of the room, a small commotion shifted the room's attention. Cecily had been approached by a young man Beatrice recognized, with relief, as exactly who she'd been hoping for. She allowed herself a single moment of quiet satisfaction before returning her attention to the Duke. He had noticed her noticing your sister, he said. "Lord Finchley's son," she confirmed. "Phase 1 complete." This time he did laugh. It was brief and genuine and nothing like the polished social laugh she had expected. It was the laugh of someone who had forgotten, momentarily, to perform instead of react. She found it, she would think later, to be the most unexpectedly appealing thing that had happened to her in 3 years. "Miss Holloway," he said when the laugh had settled, "I would like to ask you something, and I would like you to answer it honestly, even if you think honesty is not what I'm looking for." "I almost always answer honestly," she said, "even when people are looking for something else." "Do you actually believe that people can be read?" he asked. "Like books, whatever version of it your cousin was paraphrasing." She thought about it. She gave it the same serious consideration she gave most questions she thought deserved one. "I believe people leave marks," she said finally, "the way books do. You can tell what someone has been through, sometimes not the specific details, but the shape of it. Whether they've been worried for a long time, whether they're used to being taken seriously, whether they're comfortable in a room like this or performing comfort." She paused. "Whether they're lonely and have gotten very good at looking like they're not." The silence that followed was a different kind. Adrian Vale looked at her with the particular expression of a man who has just been accurately described and is deciding how to respond to that. "That last one," he said after a moment. "Yes," she said. Simply, without elaborating, "You are unusually direct." "You asked for honesty." "I did," he said. "I'm not complaining." "I'm noting it because it is." He paused. "Rare. Most people are direct," Beatrice said. "They simply stop being direct once they decide they have something to protect." "And you don't?" "I have plenty to protect," she said. "I've simply found that being indirect about it takes more energy than I have available." He considered this. The consideration was real, she could see it, the actual processing of what she'd said, rather than the social performance of listening. "I have been told," he said slowly, "that I am difficult to speak to." "By whom?" "By most people who have attempted it." "They may have found you difficult," Beatrice said. "Or they may have found what they brought to the conversation difficult. Those aren't the same problem." He was quiet for a moment. "Then what do you bring to it?" "Curiosity," she said. "And the complete absence of anything you have that I want." He turned to look at her fully. "I mean that as a compliment," she said. "Most people who approach you want your influence, your approval, or your land. I want none of those things, which means I have no reason to manage what I say, and you have no reason to manage what you hear." The expression on his face, she would try to describe it later, and find she couldn't quite do it justice. It was the expression of someone who had received something they did not know they had been waiting for, and were not entirely sure what to do with it, now that it had arrived. "That," he said, "is the most useful thing anyone has said to me this entire evening." "It's a low bar," she said. "Winter balls are not known for useful conversation." "No," he agreed, "they are generally not." He refilled her wine glass without asking, not a presumptuous gesture, she registered, but a practical one, the kind that belongs to people who have noticed something and acted on it, without making a production of having noticed. "You said you would tell me at the end of the evening," he said. Whether my confidence was accurate, I did say that. "It is currently," he said, with a glance around the room, "approximately 9:30. "There is still considerable evening remaining," she agreed. "There is," he said, "sufficient time, perhaps, to provide adequate data for the assessment." She looked at him. "Are you proposing," she said, "to spend the rest of the evening giving me evidence for a verdict?" "I am suggesting," he said, "that the refreshment table is now available. The dancing has resumed, and I am for the first time in several months not looking for a reason to leave early." The music started again behind them, a little slower than before, a little warmer. Beatrice looked at the room. Cecily was laughing at something the Finchley boy had said, a real laugh, not a polished one. Marcus was across the room and had stopped watching them, which was the best possible outcome. Helena appeared to have found a comfortable seat near the fire and was behaving herself. Phase 2, she thought, had begun without her planning it. She turned back to the Duke. "I would like to make one thing clear," she said. "Yes, I am not going to change my opinion of you because of your title," she said. "And I am not going to be unkind to you because of your reputation. I am going to form an opinion based on what you actually do and say this evening. Which means you have the same opportunity as anyone else." He looked at her for a long moment. "Miss Holloway," he said, "in the last 20 minutes, you have apologized for being used as a weapon against me, refused to perform contrition for your cousin's benefit, accurately diagnosed the specific flavor of my loneliness, and informed me that you have nothing I can give you that would make you dishonest." He paused. "You are without question the most interesting person in this room." "That is still a low bar," she said. "It is," he agreed, and this time the smile arrived completely. "But I mean it as something more than the bar." Beatrice looked at him, this man who everyone called cold, everyone called dangerous. Everyone had told her a dozen versions of before she'd spent 20 minutes in his company and found that the versions were descriptions of armor, not of the person wearing it. She thought, he is not what anyone says he is, and then more quietly, and he knows it. And he's exhausted by it. "Tell me something true," she said. "Not something polished, something true." He looked at her. The controlled composure shifted, not abandoned, but loosened. "Just slightly. I came to this evening," he said, "because my solicitor told me I should be seen more in society. He is concerned that 2 years of deliberate absence has caused people to fill in the gaps with stories." He paused. "He is right, but I find most social gatherings," he stopped. "Hollow," she said. "Hollow," he agreed. "What made this one different?" she asked. He looked at her. "You crossed the room," he said. "When your cousin gave you the choice between retreating and walking toward the thing, everyone was afraid of you walked toward it." Beatrice said nothing. "I notice that," he said quietly. "I notice it because it is rare, and because I have spent enough time being the thing people walk away from to understand what it means when someone doesn't." The music moved through the room around them. The candles had burned lower since she'd arrived. Somewhere across the ballroom, Helena had, against probability, remained in her seat. Beatrice looked at the Duke of Westmere, at the careful stillness of him, the intelligence in his eyes. The slight loosening of something she suspected was held permanently tight by most standards, and thought about what her father had told her once, when she was 12 and had decided the book she was reading was boring and wanted to put it down. "The ones that seem closed," he'd said, "are almost always the ones worth opening. The interesting ones don't always advertise. You are not what people say you are," she said. "No," he said. "They describe armor," she said. "They don't describe you." He was quiet for a moment that had weight to it. "Very few people have noticed the distinction," he said. Most people don't look past the first page, she said. He looked at her with an expression that was no longer controlled in the way it had been at the beginning of their conversation. It was still measured, but the measurement was no longer defensive. It had shifted into something more like careful attention. The difference between a man keeping himself protected and a man paying genuine attention. "Miss Holloway," he said. "Yes. Would you tell me genuinely and without the polite version what your cousin meant by his claim? The original statement. What you actually said." Beatrice considered this. "I was trying to explain," she said to someone who was complaining that they couldn't understand their mother-in-law. "I said that most conflict comes from assuming we know what someone means without asking what they intend. That if you approach people the way you approach a book you haven't read yet with curiosity rather than expectation, most of them become considerably easier to understand." She paused. Marcus was there and decided to simplify it into something that sounded more ridiculous. "It doesn't sound ridiculous," the Duke said. "No? It sounds like the approach of someone who has had to understand people very efficiently for a long time," he said. "Probably starting before she had much choice about it." She looked at him. "You read people too," she said. "Differently," he said. "I read them to know what they want from me." "You read them to know who they actually are." He paused. "That is a significant difference." "It is," she agreed. "Yours is defensive. Mine is I don't know what mine is." "Curious," he said. "You told me earlier. Genuine curiosity. Not about what someone can give you, but about who they are." He looked at her steadily. "It is rarer than you might think." Across the first round of dancing had ended. A new set was forming. The Finchley boy was saying something to Cecily that made her look down at her hands, not in embarrassment, Beatrice read, but in the particular way people look down when something has touched a place they didn't expect to be touched. Good, Beatrice thought. That meant he was saying something real. She turned back to find the Duke watching her watch her sister. "She matters enormously to you," he said. "She's the most genuinely kind person I know," Beatrice said. "She would give away the last thing she had and not understand why you were thanking her for it. The world takes advantage of people like that." She paused. "I try to make sure it doesn't take too much." "Who takes care of you?" he asked. The question landed quietly, simply, without pressure. But it landed. She took a breath. "I take care of myself," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm asking who else does." She looked at him. There it was, the thing she had sensed underneath the composure, the thing that was not coldness, not arrogance, not the shuttered indifference everyone described. It was attention, genuine, careful, direct attention. The kind that saw through the answer to the truth underneath it. "No one does, at the moment," she said, because she had promised herself honesty, and she was keeping the promise. He nodded, not with pity, not with the uncomfortable social response of someone who didn't know what to do with a true answer. Simply with the acknowledgement of someone who understood exactly what she meant, because they had an identical answer. "I thought so," he said quietly. The music changed again. Something slower. The room settled into its later rhythm, warmer, a little less performing. "Miss Holloway," he said. "Yes. I would like to continue this conversation," he said. "Not at a winter ball, somewhere without an audience." He paused. "I am aware that is an unusual request from a man you met 40 minutes ago." "It is," she said. "Will you tell me it's impossible?" She looked at him. She thought about the estate accounts she had reviewed this morning. She thought about Cecily and the Finchley boy, and the careful arithmetic of everything she was managing, and the fact that she had arrived tonight with a specific purpose, and had deviated from it entirely, and had somehow ended up having the most honest conversation she'd had in longer than she could accurately name. She thought about her father's bookshop shelf, books worth returning to. "No," she said, "I won't tell you, it's impossible." Something settled in his face, not relief exactly. The word was too simple for what she was seeing. It was the specific expression of a man who had been prepared for a certain answer, and has received a different one, and is quietly recalibrating around the new information. "Good," he said. The word was simple and entirely without performance, and it was the truest thing she'd heard all evening. She picked up her wine glass. She did not look at Marcus, who was probably still processing the fact that his demonstration had not ended the way he'd planned. She did not look at the room full of people who had watched her cross the floor toward the most feared man in the county, and were now conducting a quiet, distributed analysis of what they had witnessed. She looked at the man beside her who was, she had decided, considerably more interesting than his reputation, and considerably less impossible than anyone had suggested, and who had looked at her 4 times in the last hour, with the expression of someone who was finding something they had stopped expecting to find. "You owe me a verdict," he said. She glanced at him. At the end of the evening she reminded him. "Yes," he said. "But I find I'm beginning to suspect the verdict." "Then you can wait to be confirmed," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Then, Miss Holloway, I have spent the better part of 4 years being certain that I preferred solitude." "And now?" He looked at her. "And now," he said, "I find I would like to know what you think about everything. Which is for me a significant change of position." She felt something happen, something quiet and specific, and not at all dramatic, in the place where people feel things before they know what to call them. "Tell me something you have never said aloud," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "I am tired," he said finally, "of being the person in the room that everyone has already decided about." He paused. "I arrived tonight with no expectation of anything different. And then someone crossed the room and apologized for being weaponized against me, and told me she had nothing I could give her that would make her dishonest." He paused again. "And I thought that is what it would feel like, to be spoken to honestly." I had almost forgotten what it felt like. The music played on. Beatrice looked at her wine glass. She thought about walls and what they cost, and whether the cost was ever worth it. She thought about a book she'd read once about a walled garden that nothing could penetrate, and how eventually the person who tended it had to decide whether the purpose of a wall was to keep things out or to keep something precious inside, and how those were entirely different decisions, with entirely different answers. She thought that she was going to think about this evening for a very long time. "You are not," she said, "the person this room has decided about." He looked at her. "I know," he said. "You are the first person tonight who has made me believe someone else knows it too." Outside somewhere, past the tall windows, the winter pressed close and cold. Inside, the ballroom burned warm, and the music played on, and Lady Beatrice Holloway sat beside the man everyone called impossible and thought, no. Not impossible, simply waiting. As most worthwhile things are for someone patient enough to ask. The evening ended at 11:30, and Beatrice did not give the Duke her verdict. Not because she had changed her mind. She hadn't. She had arrived at a clear and honest conclusion sometime around 10 o'clock, standing beside the tall window while Adrian Vale told her, without any performance in it whatsoever, that he had once spent 3 days reading every book in his library's East Wing, because he couldn't sleep and didn't want to think about why he couldn't sleep, and she had thought, yes. That is a man I understand completely. She didn't give him the verdict because she decided, standing in the entrance hall waiting for the carriage, that some conclusions were worth making someone work a little longer to confirm. She told him this directly. "I have reached a verdict," she said. He turned from his conversation with the footman, and, "I'm keeping it," she said. He looked at her. "You said you would tell me at the end of the evening." "I said I would tell you if you gave me adequate data," she said. "I have the data. I simply haven't decided when to release the findings." The almost smile arrived. "That is not what you agreed to." "I agreed to nothing specific," she said. "You made an assumption about the timeline." "That's a different thing." He was quiet for a moment. "Then you are going to make this very difficult, aren't you?" "I'm going to be honest," she said. "Whether that's difficult depends on what you were expecting." The carriage arrived, hers, not his. He stepped back to give her space, and she gathered her wrap, and Cecily appeared from somewhere behind them, flushed and bright-eyed in the way of someone who has had a genuinely good evening and knows it. "Ready?" Cecily said. "Yes," Beatrice said. She turned back to the Duke. "Good evening, Mr. Vale." She had used his name deliberately. Not the title. He noticed she saw him notice, and he said nothing about it, which told her something important about the kind of man he was. "Good evening, Miss Holloway," he said. She got into the carriage. Cecily spent the entire ride home talking about the Finchley boy. His name was Thomas. He had asked twice about her favorite novel, and he had written down nothing but clearly intended to remember everything, which Cecily considered both impressive and slightly terrifying. Beatrice listened carefully, asked the right questions, and spent approximately a third of her attention on a different conversation entirely. She was replaying the moment he'd said, "I find I would like to know what you think about everything." Not "I find you interesting." Not "you are unlike other women I have met." Both of those things men said when they wanted to feel as though they were saying something, and both of them meant the man was describing himself, his interest, his comparison, rather than her. "I would like to know what you think about everything." That was different. That was about her thoughts, her perspective, her interior life treated as something that existed independently and was worth pursuing. She told herself it was one evening. She told herself that clearly and firmly, and she told herself again for good measure, and then she went to sleep and dreamed about a walled garden she had never seen. 3 days passed. On the morning of the fourth day, a letter arrived. It was formal in the way that letters from men of his position were: formal, correct address, clean handwriting, appropriate salutation. But the content was not formal at all. He wrote the way he had spoken, directly, without elaboration, with the particular economy of someone who had decided that the precise word was worth the wait. "Miss Holloway, I find I am still waiting for the verdict. I am aware this may be the intended effect. I am writing to tell you that I am aware of it, and that it is working, and that I intend to give you every reason to deliver a favorable finding. I would consider it a considerable honor if you and your sister would join me for a drive through the park on Thursday, assuming the weather cooperates, and you have not yet found reasons to refuse. Yours, A. Vale." She read it twice. She handed it to Cecily, who read it and said, "He is asking you to walk in the park. He is asking us both to join him for a drive." "He is asking you," Cecily said. "He is being polite about it." She handed it back. "Are you going to say yes?" "I haven't decided." Cecily looked at her with the specific patience of someone who has watched a person they love make things more complicated than they need to be for a long time, and has made peace with it. "Bea," she said, "you came home from the ball, and you didn't say a single word about Marcus. You always talk about Marcus when he pulls something like that. You couldn't stop talking about the Duke." "I talked about many things." "You described his hands twice," Cecily said. "You described what he did with his wine glass. You told me he laughed and it surprised you." She paused. "Say yes." Beatrice said yes. Thursday was cold and bright, the kind of winter day that has decided to behave itself for once. The Duke arrived in a carriage that was impeccably maintained and driven by a man who had the look of someone who had worked for the same employer for 20 years and would continue doing so until further notice. He stepped down when they came out, which she had expected. He greeted Cecily by name, which she had not expected, and which meant he had retained the information from the brief introduction at the ball 3 nights ago, and considered it worth using, which told her something. Cecily, for her part, shook his hand, with the straightforward confidence of someone who had decided to like a person, and wasn't interested in being formal about it. "You're the one who made my sister not notice Marcus was being horrible," Cecily said. The Duke glanced at Beatrice. "I provided a more interesting alternative," he said. "She talked about you all the way home," Cecily said. "Cecily," Beatrice said. "She described your hands," Cecily said. "Cecily." "She did," Cecily said to the Duke, entirely unrepentant. Twice he looked at Beatrice. His expression was doing the thing it did, where it wanted very much to be a smile, and was maintaining composure only by a slender margin. "Did you?" he said. "I noted several things," she said. "Hands were among them." "What did you conclude?" he asked. "From the hands. That you work," she said. "Not with your hands necessarily, but not someone who has never held anything heavier than a teacup. There's a kind of substance to how people hold things. What they're used to carrying." He looked at her for a moment. "You are," he said, "the only person who has ever analyzed my hands and described it as data." "Was it uncomfortable?" she asked. "No," he said. "It was the most accurately I have been seen in recent memory." They got into the carriage. Cecily positioned herself across from both of them with the cheerful efficiency of someone performing a social service, and the drive began. The conversation moved quickly. That was the thing about talking with him. Beatrice was discovering. There was no maintenance required, no filling of gaps with careful small talk, designed to keep things comfortable. He asked a question. She answered it honestly. She asked one back. He answered it the same way. And the questions got more interesting as they went without either of them deciding to escalate. It simply happened, the way conversations do when both people are actually listening. He asked about her father's illness. She told him the truth, the kind that takes years, and takes everything with it gradually, so that by the time you've lost the person, you've already been grieving for so long you almost don't recognize the grief anymore. He listened without trying to fix it, or redirect towards something more comfortable. How long ago, he asked. He passed 2 years back, she said. He'd been unwell for 4 years before that. So you've been managing alone for longer than 2 years. Yes, and before you were managing alone, you were managing alongside someone who was increasingly unable to help. She looked at him. Yes, that is a very long time, he said, to be the person everyone else relies on. It is what the situation required, she said. That, he said quietly, is what people say when they have not been allowed to say, I am exhausted. She said nothing for a moment. Cecily was looking out the window with a diplomacy that Beatrice recognized as active and deliberate, giving them the privacy of being unobserved while remaining present. I'm not exhausted, Beatrice said. No, I'm careful, she said. I'm careful in a way that costs something. That's different. How different? She thought about it. Exhaustion is about energy. What I'm describing is about attention. Every decision I make with half my mind on how it affects the estate, Cecily. What's owed? What's coming next? It's not tiring, exactly. She paused. It's like holding a door open. You don't notice you're doing it until you've been doing it for hours. And then your arm aches. He was quiet. Who taught you to describe things that way? He asked. My father, she said. He was a very precise talker. He said imprecise language was the source of most human misery. He was right. He generally was, she said. About everything except his health, which he described as adequate until it clearly wasn't. Something moved through his expression, not pity. Recognition. Mine died 10 years ago, he said. My father. He spent the last 2 years insisting he was fine, and I believed him because I needed to believe him. And then he wasn't fine, and I had been wrong to believe him, but I had also been right to believe him, because the alternative, spending those 2 years in grief before it was necessary, seemed worse. He paused. I still don't know if I made the right choice. There wasn't a right choice, Beatrice said. There was the choice you made, and the one you didn't, and neither of them comes with a guarantee. He looked at her. Is that comforting? No, she said. But it's true, and I've found true is more useful than comforting in the long run. The carriage slowed slightly as the path curved. Cecily had, with extraordinary tact, produced a small book from somewhere, and was reading it with the focus of someone entirely uninvolved in the conversation happening 2 feet away. I need to tell you something, the Duke said. His tone changed just slightly, just enough. Beatrice heard it immediately. Yes, she said. My solicitor, the man I mentioned, who arranged for me to appear at more social events, he has also been arranging other things. He paused. There is a family, the Cavendish family. They have a daughter of appropriate age and a useful connection to a parliamentary matter I have been involved in for 2 years. My solicitor has been suggesting carefully, but consistently, that an alliance there would be beneficial. The carriage moved. The road was smooth. Beatrice kept her face still. I see, she said. I have not agreed to anything, he said. I want to be clear about that. But I also want to be clear with you, because he stopped. Because I have told you I intend to give you every reason to deliver a favorable verdict, and a favorable verdict obtained under incomplete information is not one I want. She looked at him. You are telling me, she said, that there is a possible arrangement your solicitor is managing, and that you haven't agreed to it, and that you're telling me before it becomes relevant, because you think I deserve to know. Yes, he said. Why? She asked. He was quiet for a moment. Because the last time someone made a significant decision that affected my life without telling me it was coming, I spent 2 years adjusting to the consequences. I did not enjoy it. I decided not to be the person who did that to someone else. She studied him. What happened? She asked. 2 years ago. The thing you're not saying. His jaw shifted very slightly. My wife died. She was ill, he said, for a long time. And I believed I had been told, and I believed it, that she was improving. And then she wasn't, and the information that was kept from me, by people who thought they were protecting me, meant that I missed. He stopped. Time, she said quietly. I'm sorry, she said. Not I'm so sorry for your loss, not the social version of it. Just I'm sorry. 2 words that were the honest truth without any decoration on them. He looked at her. Thank you, he said, in the same register. The same simplicity. They sat in quiet for a moment that was not empty. The Cavendish arrangement, Beatrice said. Is it what you want? No, he said, it is not. Have you told your solicitor that? I have told him I'm still considering the matter. Why haven't you simply told him no? He was quiet for a beat. Because 2 weeks ago I had no particular reason to tell him no. The arrangement was practical, and I had no objection to practical things. I was not expecting. He paused. I was not expecting Thursday. She looked at him. He looked back. You were not expecting me, she said. I was not expecting you, he confirmed. And there was nothing practiced about the way he said it. Nothing managed. It was simply the sentence that was true, delivered without any attempt to make it sound like less than it was. Cecily turned a page, very loudly, very deliberately. Neither of them looked at her. I am going to ask you something, Beatrice said. And I want you to answer honestly, even if you think it will complicate things. Yes. Is this conversation something you are having because you are lonely, and I was available and direct, and you needed to feel understood for one evening? She held his gaze. Or is this something you are having because you genuinely want to know me? He did not hesitate. I have been lonely for 4 years, he said. I have spent a significant portion of those years in the company of people who were available and direct, and whom I liked a great deal. I did not feel compelled to tell any of them about the Cavendish arrangement. I did not feel compelled to tell any of them anything true. He paused. I told you because I could not think of a single good reason not to. And I have been telling you things all evening, because every time I do, you respond with something that makes me want to tell you more. He stopped. That is not a feeling I have had in 4 years, possibly longer. Beatrice breathed. All right, she said. All right, he said. What does all right mean? It means I believe you, she said. And it means I'm not going to pretend I'm not having an equivalent experience. You're not, he said. Careful, as though he wanted to confirm it and was also somewhat afraid of confirming it. No, she said, I'm not. He was quiet for a moment. Then the verdict. Yes, she said. Will you tell me now? She looked at him, this man who had arrived at a winter ball to be seen, and had ended up seen in a way he had clearly not planned for, who had told her true things one after another, not because he was performing honesty, but because she had asked for it, and he had decided she deserved to have it. Who had told her about an arrangement he wasn't obligated to disclose, because he thought she deserved to know. Favorable, she said. He breathed, just slightly. But she saw it substantially, she added, with room for amendment as additional data is collected. That sounds like a woman who plans to continue collecting data, he said. I generally don't stop at the first sample, she said. It's not good methodology. The almost smile arrived fully. No, he agreed, it isn't. Cecily closed her book. Are we done? She asked pleasantly. Cecily, Beatrice said. I've been very patient, Cecily said. I've been reading the same page for 20 minutes. She looked at the Duke. She does this, by the way. She makes everything take longer than it needs to, because she thinks things that come easily aren't worth having. I don't think that, Beatrice said. You do, Cecily said, not unkindly. You've thought it your whole life. It's why you were still arguing with yourself on the way home from the ball when the answer was obvious. She smiled at the Duke. The answer was obvious, Mr. Vale. It was obvious from the minute she told me what you said about her crossing the room. He looked at Beatrice. What did I say? That you had noticed it because you understood what it meant, Beatrice said. That you'd spent enough time, being the people walked away from, to know what it meant when someone didn't. Something moved through his expression. You told her that, he said. She tells me everything, Cecily said. She just does it while pretending she's giving me a factual report. It was a factual report, Beatrice said. It was a love letter, Cecily said cheerfully. To the idea of a man who finally said something real. A silence. Not uncomfortable. The specific silence of something true that has been said in front of everyone involved and cannot be taken back, which is the only useful kind. I realize, the Duke said carefully, that I am in a conversation with 2 people and one of them is significantly more honest than she wants me to know she is. I'm honest, Beatrice said. You are, he agreed. About other people, about ideas, about data, he looked at her. You are considerably more careful when it comes to yourself. She said nothing. She is, Cecily confirmed. Cecily. You are, her sister said. You gave him a verdict on methodology. He had your feelings as a data collection process. You told him all right when he said something that made your whole face change. She was not teasing. Her voice was entirely kind. You're allowed to just say the real thing, Bea." The carriage had slowed. They were approaching the turning back toward the Ishit. The drive was nearly done. The afternoon was nearly done, and Beatrice was aware that it was ending faster than she wanted it to. She looked at the Duke. "I came home from the ball," she said, "and I couldn't stop thinking about you. Not about what you said specifically, although that too. About you the person, what it would be like to talk to you again." She paused. "I don't have that experience frequently. I don't have it at all in recent memory. I told myself it was the unusualness of the evening, and I half believed it. And then your letter arrived, and I read it twice before I let Cecily see it, and I knew I was lying to myself." He was very still. "That," she said, "is the real verdict." He looked at her for a long moment, that full, direct look that did not perform anything, did not manage anything, simply looked and saw and let what it saw matter. "Miss Holloway," he said. "Yes, I would like to call on you," he said. "Not as a social nicety, not as a preliminary to any arrangement, but because I would like to know you, and that requires time, and I intend to use whatever time you are willing to give me honestly and well." She looked at him. "Yes," she said simply, without methodology. He nodded. Just once, but the thing in his expression, the thing she had no adequate word for yet, the specific quality of someone who has been holding themselves separate from hope for a long time and has just decided it to stop, that was loud and clear and entirely unmistakable. The carriage stopped. The footman opened the door. Cecily descended first with the diplomatic efficiency of someone removing themselves from a moment that didn't require three people. Beatrice moved to follow. The Duke stepped down and offered his hand not as a formality but as a gesture. She took it, and, for one moment, standing on the step in the cold winter afternoon, she was looking directly at him at eye level. Close enough to see the exact shade of those blue-gray eyes and the fine line of tension that never fully left the corners of them. "Thursday was a good idea," she said. "It was," he agreed. "It turned out considerably better than expected." She descended. "Let go of his hand, Mr. Vale," she said. "Miss Holloway." She walked toward the house. She did not look back. She had decided that before she got out of the carriage that she would not look back, because some things were better confirmed forward. But she heard behind her the very faint sound of a man releasing a breath he had been holding for longer than the afternoon. She kept walking. She was smiling. She didn't stop. Inside, Cecily was already in the hall with her coat half off and her eyes bright with the energy of someone who has watched something wonderful happen and is barely containing the need to discuss it. "Well," she said. "He's calling on me," Beatrice said. Cecily made a sound that was not at all dignified and entirely genuine. "Bea," she said. "He looked at you like you were the answer to a question he'd forgotten he was asking." Beatrice hung up her wrap. "Don't," she said. "He did." "I know he did," she said quietly. "That's why I'm being careful." Cecily was quiet for a moment. "What are you afraid of?" she asked. Not unkindly, directly the way Cecily asked hard things when she'd decided they needed asking. Beatrice thought about it. She thought about the Cavendish arrangement, still hovering somewhere in the background like a letter that hadn't been opened yet. She thought about a solicitor who had been carefully, consistently suggesting a practical alliance, and the weight of practical things in the life of a man who had spent 4 years making practical decisions because they were the only kind available to him. She thought about what happened when people chose practical things and called it wisdom, and what got left on the other side of that choice. "I'm afraid," she said, "that what he feels right now is real, and that what the world requires of him will be stronger." Cecily said nothing. "I'm afraid," Beatrice continued, "that I will allow myself to know him, and he will realize what it costs him, and he will choose the practical thing. And I will have let someone all the way in, for the first time in years, and it will have been a very expensive mistake." Cecily crossed the hall and took her sister's hand. "Or," she said, "he will realize what it cost him, and choose you anyway, and it will be the best decision either of you ever made." Beatrice looked at her. "Read the book that way," Cecily said. "The way you always say, with curiosity instead of expectation. See what happens." A pause, a long one. "He told his solicitor he's still considering the Cavendish matter," Beatrice said. "He told you about the Cavendish matter," Cecily said. "On the second time you'd ever spoken to each other. He told you when he didn't have to. What does that say?" Beatrice thought about a man who had said The last time someone made a sick decision that affected my life without telling me it was coming. I spent 2 years adjusting to the consequences. I decided not to be the person who did that to someone else. She thought about what kind of person that decision came from. It says he's trying, she said. It says more than that, Cecily said. It says he already cares what you think. Beatrice was quiet. Outside, the carriage had gone. The winter afternoon was settling into early dark. Somewhere across the county, in a house considerably larger and considerably quieter than this one, a man with blue-gray eyes and a solicitor problem and 4 years of careful distance behind him was, she suspected, doing something similar to what she was doing now. Sitting with a feeling he had not been expecting, deciding what to do with it. She went upstairs. She sat at her desk. She opened the letter he had sent and read it one more time. The directness of it, the slight wryness, the specific honesty of it, is working from a man who could have pretended it wasn't. And she thought about walls and walled gardens, and what happens when you decide carefully and deliberately to open a door. She picked up her pen. She wrote, Mr. Vale, Thursday was indeed favorable data. I find I am also still considering additional methodology. The work in the East Wing of our estate library requires a second opinion on Thursday week, if you are available and the weather cooperates. Yours B. Holloway. P.S. My sister extends her regards and asks that you not take her editorial commentary as representative of official Holloway family policy. I will note for the record that I have not asked her to stop. She sealed it. She did not second-guess it. She left it for the Morning Post. Then she went to bed and did not dream about walled gardens, and woke in the morning with the specific clarity of someone who has made a decision they intend to keep. He came on Thursday week exactly as she had invited him, and he brought no solicitor, no agenda, and no performance. He arrived at the Holloway estate with a directness that she was beginning to understand was simply how he moved through the world when he had decided something mattered straight toward it. Without the elaborate approach routes most people of his position considered mandatory. The library East Wing was real. She had not invented it. 3 shelves of her father's collection had suffered water damage the previous autumn, and the repair work had been ongoing in the slow, imperfect way of things that had no budget and her full attention, and not quite enough of either. She had told him about it in the letter, because it was true, and because she had learned from watching him at the ball and in the carriage that he responded better to truth than to occasion. He looked at the damaged shelves and said, "What do you need?" Not "how unfortunate," not "I know an excellent man for this sort of work." Just "what do you need?" in the tone of someone who intended the question practically. "Mostly time," she said. "The adhesive has to dry between applications." "It's tedious work. I have time," he said. She handed him a brush. They worked for 2 hours. He was careful, more careful than she expected, with the natural precision of someone who had handled things that mattered and understood that handling them badly had consequences. He asked questions about the process and listened to the answers, and did not offer opinions about things he didn't know, which was rarer than it should have been. Somewhere in the middle of the second hour, he said, without looking up from the spine he was pressing flat, "I spoke to my solicitor." Her hands continued working. "About the Cavendish matter." "Yes. What did you tell him?" A pause. "I told him I was no longer considering it." She looked up. He was still focused on the spine in his hands. He was not pleased. He made several arguments about timing and political advantage, and the practical wisdom of alliance at this stage in my life. He pressed the material flat with one careful finger. I told him I had heard the arguments and understood them, and was not changing my position. What did he say? He asked if there was a specific reason for the change. Adrian set the spine down. Looked at her. I told him yes. The library was very quiet. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know. We've spoken 3 times. "I know that too." He looked at her steadily. It was still the right decision. "I was not going to continue allowing a practical arrangement to move forward while simultaneously asking to call on you. That is not honest, and I had already committed to being honest with you." She set down her brush. "You committed to no such thing," she said. "I asked for honesty. You agreed. That's different from a commitment." "Is it?" he said. She looked at him. "For most people," he said, "perhaps. For me, when I agree to something, I mean it. I don't agree to things I don't intend." He paused. "I intended it," she breathed. This was the thing about him that she was still adjusting to. Even after 3 conversations, the complete absence of the protective layer, most people maintained between what they felt and what they said. She had thought at the ball that he was simply more honest than average. She was understanding now that it was something more specific than that. He had decided, at some point in the years behind him, that the cost of dishonesty was higher than the cost of being seen, and he had rearranged himself around that decision entirely. "My sister is going to be insufferable when I tell her," Beatrice said. Something arrived in his face, the full smile, the one she'd seen only twice before. "You're going to tell her. I tell her everything," she said. "I do it while pretending I'm being factual, apparently, but yes." "Then tell her," he said, "that I am also telling someone. My friend Graves, he is the closest thing I have to a confidant. He will react with considerably less enthusiasm than your sister, but considerably more irony." "What will he say?" "He will say that it took me 4 years to meet one honest woman, and I managed to find her at a winter ball of all places, which he will find either fated or statistically improbable, and he will tell me both at the same time." He paused. "He will also say I'm moving too quickly." "Are you?" she asked. He considered it. "No," he said, "I don't think speed is the issue. I think the issue is that what I'm doing doesn't look like what people expect this to look like. It doesn't look like courtship because courtship is usually a performance. And this," he gestured between them, at the brushes and the damaged spines and the afternoon light. "This is not a performance." "No," she agreed, "it isn't." "That makes people uncomfortable," he said. "When things don't look like what they're supposed to look like. They assume something is wrong with it." "Is something wrong with it?" "Not from where I'm standing," he said. She picked up her brush again. "Tell me about Graves," she said. "Your friend. What does he actually think of you?" He was quiet for a moment. "He thinks I am too controlled. He's told me so on multiple occasions. He thinks I use discipline as a substitute for feeling things." A pause. "He's not entirely wrong, is he? I had a period," he said carefully, "after my wife died, when I controlled everything I could, because I was unable to control the one thing that mattered most. It became habitual. The control outlasted the crisis it was designed for. And now," he looked at her, "and now I find that certain things are making the habit harder to maintain, which I am choosing to interpret as progress rather than alarm." "Certain things," she said. "One thing," he corrected. "Specifically." She felt the warmth of it, specific and quiet and entirely real, and did not perform an absence of reaction, because she had promised herself honesty, and performing absence was the opposite of honest. "I need to tell you something," she said. His posture shifted. Fractionally, but she saw it. "My cousin Marcus," she said. "He came here yesterday." Adrian waited. "He had heard from somewhere, someone that you had been calling on me." That Thursday's drive had occurred. She set her brush down with care. "He sat in the parlor for an hour and told me, very precisely, all the reasons that what was happening was a mistake. He said you were not the marrying kind. He said you had been avoiding society's expectations for 4 years, and that any woman who believed she would be the exception was flattering herself dangerously." She paused. "He said several other things of that nature." "Did you ask him to leave?" Adrian said. His voice was even, very even, the specific evenness of someone managing something. "Eventually," she said, "I let him finish first." "Why?" "Because I wanted to know what he actually thought." She looked at the shelf she was working on. "Not about you. I already know what I think about you. I wanted to know how much he knew, whether there was something real underneath the unpleasantness, or whether it was entirely the usual." "And it was entirely the usual," she said. "He doesn't know anything except that you have wealth and influence and I don't. And the thought of me having access to either, without going through him, is something he finds personally offensive." She paused. "But he said one thing that I keep returning to. Tell me." She looked at him directly. "He said that you have been very careful for 4 years to avoid exactly the kind of situation you are currently in. He said that the behavior of a man who has made 4 years of careful choices does not change because of 3 conversations with an interesting woman, and that I was mistaking novelty for intention." A silence. "Is he wrong?" she asked. He looked at her. "He is wrong about the cause," Adrian said. "He is not entirely wrong about the history." His jaw was set. Not with anger, with the specific tightening of someone being honest about something they'd rather not examine. "I have been careful. I have been very careful. I told you that I came to the ball because my solicitors suggested it, and I have told you that I found the arrangement with the Cavendishes practical. Those are both true. What they add up to is a man who had stopped expecting to want something different. He paused. Marcus is right that the behavior of a man like that does not usually change because of 3 conversations. Then, she said, then it changes because of the specific conversations, he said. Not 3 conversations in general. These 3 with you, he held her gaze. I cannot make that sound less than it is, and I'm not going to try. I am aware that it is fast. I am aware it does not look like pattern. I am asking you to decide whether you trust the difference between novelty and intention, because I cannot prove it to you with precedent. I can only keep being what I've been, and let you assess it over time. She breathed. That, she said, is the most honest thing anyone has said to me in 6 years. Is 6 years the current record? You set a new one every conversation, she said. It's becoming a problem. Why a problem? Because it makes it harder to be careful, she said. Do you need to be careful? I have always needed to be careful. With me, he pressed. She looked at him. With myself, she said. I have been the person who manages things for a long time. Cecily, the estate, everything that needs handling. And I am very good at it, and I don't resent it. But it means I have spent years not letting myself want things that seemed impractical. Not because I don't feel them, because I can't afford to feel them if acting on them costs something I don't have available. She paused. You are, she stopped. Say it, he said quietly. You are not impractical, she said. You are the opposite of impractical. You are a sensible, principled man who has told me clearly and directly what he wants and why. And that is precisely why it frightens me more than impractical would. He was very still, because impractical I could dismiss, she said. Practical and real and present that I have to take seriously. And taking it seriously means it can hurt if it goes wrong. It can hurt, he agreed. I won't tell you it can't. He moved very slightly closer. Not dramatically, just the closing of unnecessary distance. But I will tell you that I have been hurt before, and that loss did not make me want less. It made me understand what the wanting was for. He paused. I'm not here because I'm lonely, Beatrice. I'm here because I found someone who makes the quiet bearable, and I would be a fool to walk away from that because it happened faster than convention expects. It was the first time he had used her name without the prefix. She heard it. She knew he had done it deliberately. She didn't address it, because addressing it would have meant performing a reaction rather than having one, and what she was having was not something she could have performed. All right, she said, the same word she had used before. All right, he echoed with the faint recognition of it. I'm going to ask you to do something, she said. Yes. Come to dinner, she said, here, with Cecily and me. Not a formal occasion, no performance. Just dinner at a table in a house that is 3 kinds of falling apart, where Cecily will ask you questions she has been saving since Thursday, and the cook makes one dish well and everything else adequately. She paused. I want to see what you do with that. He looked at her. When, he said. Saturday, she said, if you're available. I'll make myself available, he said. She nodded. Picked up her brush. Went back to the spine she had been working on. After a moment, he picked up his brush and did the same. They worked in silence for another 20 minutes, which was entirely comfortable, which was itself something she filed away and intended to think about later. Saturday arrived. Dinner was exactly what she had promised, imperfect and honest, and nothing like the formal affairs his world required. The parlor ceiling had a water stain that she had stopped seeing months ago, and now noticed acutely. The silver was polished but mismatched. The cook had made the one thing she made well, which was a roasted lamb that required no apology, and everything else was indeed adequate. Cecily had prepared questions. This was obvious from the moment they sat down, and it was equally obvious that she was choosing the order of them strategically, warming up before she reached the ones she actually wanted to ask. She got through. How long have you had Westmere Estate, and do you find London exhausting or necessary before arriving at? Do you have people in your life who tell you when you're wrong? Adrian looked at her. Yes, he said. 1. His name is Graves, and he is unreasonably good at it. Do you listen? Cecily asked. More than I used to, he said. Less than I should. Bea listens, Cecily said. She listens even when it makes her change her mind about something she'd already decided, which I have always found admirable and slightly inconvenient. Inconvenient for whom? He asked. For people who expect her to stick with the wrong decision, Cecily said. She doesn't. If someone presents her with better information, she updates. She looked at him. Can you do that? Yes, he said. Has anyone given you better information recently? He glanced at Beatrice. Yes, he said, recently. Good, Cecily said, and helped herself to more lamb with the satisfaction of someone who had confirmed what she needed to confirm, and was done with the formal portion of the assessment. The dinner continued. The conversation moved not in a straight line, but in the way of real conversation, branching and returning, and occasionally arriving somewhere none of them had planned. He talked about his estate with the genuine affection of someone who had grown up in a place and understood it not as property, but as a responsibility that was also, underneath, a love. She told him about the bookshop her father had once owned before the illness, the small lending library he'd run out of the back, the system he'd used, the particular smell of it. Cecily told a story about the time Beatrice had reorganized the entire household ledger system at age 19 and had been so methodical about it that their father had said she had the heart of an accountant and the mind of a general and had meant both as compliments. He wasn't wrong, Adrian said. He was rarely wrong about people, Beatrice said. A quality, he said, that runs in the family. Cecily looked very pleased with this. After dinner, Cecily excused herself with the transparent and kind diplomacy she had been deploying all week, and Beatrice and Adrian sat in the parlor with tea. That was better than the dinner had warranted, and the particular ease of two people who had moved past the stage of performing comfort and arrived at the genuine thing. Your cousin came to see you, he said. Not a question, he had been thinking about it since she'd told him. Yes, will he come again? Probably, she said. Marcus doesn't accept a lack of result as a conclusion. He accepts it as a delay. What does he want specifically? He wants to believe that his position in the family is relevant, she said. He's the nearest male relative on the Holloway side. If I marry badly or foolishly, he gets to be the person who tried to prevent it. If I marry well, he will find a way to claim proximity. She paused. What he cannot tolerate is a situation where I make a significant decision, and he had no role in shaping it. He has no authority over you. No, she said, but he has the ability to cause social difficulty if he decides to. And social difficulty rumors, implications, the kind of thing that circulates at events like the ball, costs something for everyone adjacent to it, including you. He was quiet. I'm not saying this to frighten you off, she said. I'm saying it because you told me you prefer to make decisions with complete information. I do, he said. And the information you're giving me is that your cousin is a social liability who is also petty enough to act on personal resentment. He paused. I have been navigating social liabilities since I inherited at 24. I am not frightened of Marcus Holloway. I'm not asking you to be frightened of him, she said. I'm asking you to understand what you're taking on. Beatrice. He said her name the same way he had in the library, deliberate, without prefix, as though the title was a formality they had already moved past. I told my solicitor I was no longer considering the Cavendish matter. I told him because of you. I am sitting in a parlor with a water stain on the ceiling drinking excellent tea, and I have not had an evening this worth having in 4 years. He looked at her. Your cousin is a secondary consideration. She looked at him. You should know, she said quietly, that when I said I was frightened earlier, in the library, I meant it. Not of you, of what I might do if I let myself want this fully and it doesn't hold. I know, he said. I don't recover quickly from things that matter, she said. I'm not built that way. I recover thoroughly, eventually. But it takes a long time and it costs a great deal. And I have spent the last several years not spending what I can't afford. He set down his teacup. He leaned forwards, slightly, not reaching toward her, just closing the distance between their conversation. I need you to hear something, he said. Yes, I am not a risk you can fully calculate, he said. I know that, you know that, no one is. But I can tell you what I am and what I'm not, and let you make your decision with that. He paused. I am not someone who says things I don't mean. I am not someone who begins something without intending to see it through. I am not, and this is the thing I want you to hear most clearly, someone who has made a habit of being careless with people who matter to him. His voice was very quiet now. And you matter to him. You have since Thursday, and that is either fast or true, and I have decided it is true and fast, and I am asking you to decide the same. Beatrice was quiet for a long moment. Then, did you practice that? Something arrived in his expression. "No," he said. "I thought about what I needed to say and then I said it." "Is that the same as practicing?" "No," she said. "Practicing would have had more transitions." The almost smile, then the full one. Then something quieter behind it, something that was not performance and not composure, but simply the face of a man who had said a true thing and was waiting. "You matter to me too," she said, "since the ball. Since you looked at me and said you'd decided to find me interesting, and I thought finally. Someone who is being honest about what they're doing." She paused. "I have been very careful with that. I have been careful because careful is what I know. But I have also been entirely unable to stop thinking about you, which is the least careful thing I've done in years." He looked at her. "Good," he said. "You say that a lot," she said. "Because I mean it every time." He was quiet for a moment. "I want to ask you something." "Yes. Will you let me be present? Not at arm's length, managed carefully, the way you manage everything. Present. In the difficulty and the decisions and the things that are actually happening in your life." He paused. "I am not asking to solve anything. I am asking to be someone you do not have to present the organized version to." She felt something shift somewhere under her ribs, somewhere she didn't have a name for. "That," she said, "is a very large thing to ask." "I know," he said. "I'm asking anyway." She looked at him for a long moment. "The East Wing shelves," she said. "There are 14 more that need work." "I'll come Wednesday," he said. "And the ledgers," she said. "The estate account system is in a state that would make my father weep. I have been managing it, but I made 3 errors last quarter that I caught only because I checked 3 times. I'll look at it with you," he said. "Not to correct it. To help you find the pattern. You don't know my system." "I'll learn it," he said simply. She breathed. "Wednesday," she said. "Wednesday," he agreed. The fire burned lower, the tea cooled. Somewhere upstairs, Cecily had stopped moving around with suspicious deliberateness and had presumably gone to bed. He left at 9:30 correctly, without being pressed, with the instinct of someone who understood when an evening was complete and didn't need to be extended past its natural end. At the door he turned. "Beatrice," he said. "Yes." "I told Graves about you this morning," he said, "before I came." She hadn't expected that. What did he say? He said, and I am quoting precisely, that any woman who invited the Duke of Westmere to fix damaged bookshelves was either brilliantly strategic or entirely genuine, and that either quality was worth investigating. He paused. I told him it was both. She looked at him. It was, she agreed. Something in his face, quiet and real and entirely uncovered. "Good night, Miss Holloway," he said, back to the formal address, but warm now, a private thing between them. "Good night, Mr. Vale," she said. He left. She closed the door and stood for a moment in the hall, and the feeling under her ribs settled into something she finally allowed herself to name. Not fear, not calculation, not careful management of a situation she wasn't sure about. Something simpler, something she had last felt so long ago, she had almost stopped believing she would feel it again. She wanted this, she wanted him. Not the title, not the practical advantage, not the relief of being someone who was chosen, but him, specifically, with his precise honesty and his quiet laugh and the way he held things carefully without making a performance of caring for them. She wanted this. She went upstairs. She did not tell herself to be careful. She should have been careful. The letter arrived Monday morning, 2 days before Wednesday, and it was not from Adrian. It was from a woman named Mrs. Harriet Cavendish, the mother. The letter was written in the careful, elegant hand of a woman who had been composing difficult letters for a long time and knew exactly how much pressure to apply without appearing to press. She wrote that she had heard through mutual acquaintances that the Duke of Westmere had been calling on Miss Holloway of Shropshire. She wrote that she felt it her duty, as someone with a long association with the Vale family, to share certain information that Miss Holloway might not be aware of. She wrote that she did not wish to cause distress. Then she caused distress. She wrote that the arrangement between her daughter and the Duke had not been merely her solicitor's suggestion. It had been a matter of discussion between the two families for over a year. That her daughter, Miss Eliza Cavendish, had been led to understand, by Adrian Vale himself, at a dinner in October, that the matter was progressing. That Eliza had turned down 2 other offers on the basis of that understanding. She wrote, with the precise politeness of a blade, "I do not know what His Grace has represented to you, Miss Holloway." I know only what he represented to my daughter. I leave it to your good judgment to assess what that means." Beatrice read the letter once, then she sat very still. October, 2 months ago. He had been at a dinner in October and had allowed a young woman to understand that a marriage arrangement was progressing. And then in December he had come to a winter ball and told Beatrice he was not considering the arrangement. She thought about what he had said in the carriage. "I have not agreed to anything." She thought about what Mrs. Cavendish had written. Eliza had turned down 2 other offers on the basis of that understanding. Those 2 things could both be true. A man could believe he had not agreed to anything, while a woman across a dinner table understood that he had. The gap between those 2 truths was the gap between carelessness and intention, and she didn't know she could not know from a letter which side of it Adrian Vale was standing on. She set the letter on the desk. She thought about everything he had said to her. The precision of it, the directness, the way he had told her about the Cavendish matter, before she'd known it existed because he believed she deserved to know. She thought about a man who had said, "The last time someone made a significant decision that affected my life, without telling me, it was coming. I spent 2 years adjusting to the consequences. I decided not to be the person who did that to someone else." She thought about Eliza Cavendish, who had turned down 2 offers. She thought about her own ribs and the thing that had settled there 2 nights ago, and how expensive it was going to be if she was wrong. She picked up her pen. She wrote to Adrian, not an accusation, not a conclusion. 1 sentence: "Something has come to my attention that I believe you should know about. If you are available tomorrow, I would ask that you come." She sealed it. She sent it. Then she sat in the chair by the window and waited, which was the hardest thing she had done in a very long time. And she did it anyway, because jumping to conclusions was for people who were afraid to find out the truth. And she had promised herself a long time ago that she would never be afraid of the truth, even when it hurt, especially then. He came the next morning at 10 o'clock, which meant he had received her note the previous evening and had not waited until a reasonable hour to respond. He had come as early as propriety permitted, and the fact that he had calculated exactly how early that was, and arrived at precisely that time told her something before he had said a single word. She met him in the parlor. She had the letter in her hand. She did not offer tea. She handed him the letter. He read it. She watched his face while he read. She had learned over the past weeks how to read the small shifts in his expression, the ones that happened below the level of the controlled composure he maintained in public. His jaw tightened at the 2nd paragraph. His eyes went still at the 3rd. At the final line, "I leave it to your good judgment to assess what that means." Something moved through his expression that was not guilt and was not anger, and was, she decided, the specific look of a man recognizing the shape of a mistake he had made without knowing he was making it. He set the letter down. He did not hand it back to her. He set it on the table between them and looked at it for a moment before he looked at her. "October," he said. "Yes, the dinner she is describing, I was there. The Cavendishes hosted a number of people with connections to the parliamentary matter I mentioned. It was an evening I attended because my solicitor told me I should attend it, in the same category as the ball." He paused. "Eliza Cavendish she is a perfectly pleasant young woman. We spoke for perhaps 40 minutes. Her mother says she turned down 2 offers," Beatrice said. Her voice was even. She was keeping it even because the alternative was something less productive, based on her understanding of how that evening went. "I know," he said. "Did you give her reason for that understanding?" He was quiet for a moment that was too long. "Not intentionally," he said. "But I can see reading this how she might have formed it." He looked at Beatrice directly. "My solicitor had been consistent with the Cavendish family for some months before that dinner. I knew that, I attended knowing that, and I spoke to Eliza with I was not cold to her. I was not discouraging. I spoke the way I speak to people I find pleasant and have no particular objection to." He paused. In the context of what my solicitor had been saying, in the context of what her family would have been expecting, I can see that what I intended as ordinary courtesy could have read as something more. Beatrice looked at him. "Did you know that at the time?" she asked. "No," he said. "I should have. I understand the mechanics of these situations well enough to have understood it. I didn't because I wasn't paying enough attention to what I was communicating." His jaw tightened. That is not an excuse, it is the accurate description of a failure. She sat down, not because she was tired, because she needed to think clearly, and she thought more clearly when she wasn't standing. There is a young woman, she said, who has been waiting since October. Yes, and she doesn't know that you've told your solicitor you're no longer considering the matter. No, he said. She would only know what her mother has told her, and her mother clearly did not know either until he stopped. Until someone told her you were calling on me, Beatrice said. Yes, Marcus, she said, not a question. He looked at her. Possibly. Or any of the people who were watching at the ball, or anyone who saw the carriage on Thursday. He paused. It doesn't matter who told her. What matters is that Eliza Cavendish has been operating under an understanding that I allowed to form, and I have not corrected it, and she is now aware that I have been calling on you, and she does not understand why. The parlor was very quiet. What are you going to do? Beatrice asked. I need to speak to her, he said to her family. Directly, not through solicitors. I owe her that a clear and honest conversation, not a withdrawal conducted through correspondence. He paused. I should have done this before I called on you the first time. I told my solicitor the matter was closed, and I believed that was sufficient, and I was wrong. The matter was not closed until the person most affected understood it was closed. Beatrice was quiet. He leaned forward. I need you to hear something. I'm listening. What I did in October was careless, he said. Not dishonest. I never told Eliza Cavendish I intended to marry her. I never made a promise, but careless. And in this context, careless has consequences that feel like dishonesty to the people who bear them. He held her gaze. I am telling you this because I told you I would be honest with you even when honesty is uncomfortable, and this is uncomfortable, and I am still telling you. A pause. I am also telling you that what I need to do, speak to the Cavendishes. Correct the misunderstanding clearly that needs to happen before anything between us moves further. Because I will not ask you to stand in a situation where another woman's pain is the foundation. She looked at him. You're not asking my permission, she said. No, I'm telling you what I'm going to do and why, because you deserve to know. He paused. And because I want to ask you something afterward, and I need this to be resolved first. What do you want to ask me? I'll ask it when the other thing is done, he said. She held his gaze for a long moment. She thought about Mrs. Cavendish's letter and the precision of it, the careful, controlled anger of a woman protecting her daughter. She thought about Eliza, who was probably 22, and had been imagining a future since October, and did not yet know the imagination was wrong. She thought about what it cost to be on the receiving end of that kind of carelessness, not malice, not dishonesty, just the particular damage of being an afterthought in someone else's decision. She thought about Adrian's face when he had read the letter. Not guilt recognition, the specific look of someone seeing their own error clearly for the first time and not looking away from it. Go, she said. He looked at her. You're not asking me to explain further. You've explained, she said. I believe you. Go fix the thing that needs fixing. Something moved through his expression, relief, but not the relief of someone who has gotten away with something. The relief of someone who has been seen clearly and found, despite the failure, to still be worth seeing. I'll come back, he said. I know, she said. He stood. Then paused. Beatrice, he said. Yes, I'm sorry, he said. Not the social version, the actual version. I know the difference by now, she said. He left. She sat in the parlor with the letter on the table, between them and the cold morning, pressing against the windows, and the complicated feeling of a woman who has discovered that the man she is falling in love with is imperfect in a specific and human way and has chosen with full information to remain. He was gone for 4 days. On the first day she was steady, which was an act of will but a successful one. On the second day, Cecily found her reading the same page of a novel for the third time and said nothing, simply made tea and sat beside her until the steadiness came back on its own. On third day, Marcus arrived. He had heard, of course he had heard, because Marcus had built an entire social life around hearing things first and using them at the moment of maximum utility that the Duke of Westmere had gone to Cavendish Hall. He sat in the parlor with the specific satisfaction of a man who has been proven correct and wants to make certain everyone is aware of it. I told you, he said. You told me several things, Beatrice said. You'll need to be specific, he went back, Marcus said. Whatever he said to you, he went back to the Cavendishes. He went to correct a misunderstanding, she said. That is what a man says when he has reconsidered. He looked at her with the pity of someone who has assembled his expression specifically to wound. Bea, I know you believed he was serious. I am sorry to have been right. You're not sorry, she said. You're pleased. And you've been pleased since you walked in, which means you have more information than the fact of his going. Something flickered in Marcus's expression, the briefly exposed calculation of a man who has underestimated the person across from him. His friend Graves, Marcus said, told someone that the Duke said the exact words were that he had matters to settle before he could move forward. Yes, she said, he told me the same thing. Marcus blinked. He told you he had matters to settle, he said. He told me he needed to speak to the Cavendishes honestly because he had been careless and they deserved clarity. She looked at her cousin directly. He told me this the morning after the letter arrived. He told me before I asked him to. He sat in that chair and described his own failure accurately and without making it sound smaller than it was. Marcus was quiet. That is not, she said, the behavior of a man who is reconsidering. Then what is it? It is the behavior of a man who takes responsibility, she said. Which I understand is unfamiliar. Marcus's expression shifted, the pity going somewhere else, replaced by something sharper and less managed. You have decided you trust him. I have decided I trust what I have seen, she said. Which is different and more reliable. And if you're wrong, then I'll have been wrong, she said. With complete information, having looked at everything clearly, having asked every question worth asking, she held his gaze. That is not the same as being foolish, and it is considerably better than spending my life refusing every real thing, because the wrong version of it might hurt. Marcus stood. He was not going to win this conversation, and he had realized it, which made him dangerous in a different way, the way of people who cannot win what they want and decide to damage what they can't have. I hope you're right, he said at the door. I genuinely do, and the genuinely was the word he used when he meant the opposite. I know, she said. Goodbye, Marcus. He left. She sat for a moment. Then she went to the library east wing and worked on the shelves for 2 hours, because the work was real and the results were visible, and she needed both of those things today. He came back on the 4th day in the afternoon. She heard the carriage. She did not go to the window. She waited in the library, where she had been working, and let the footman announce him, because some things were better received at the proper pace. He came into the library. He looked, she thought, like a man who had spent 4 days doing something difficult and had done it correctly, which was not the same as comfortably. Sit down, she said. Tell me, she said. I spoke to Mr. Cavendish first, he said. He is a practical man, and he understood quickly. He was not pleased. He had political reasons for wanting the alliance, but he is the kind of man who accepts clear information when it's delivered clearly. He paused. Mrs. Cavendish was harder. She had invested considerably more in the expectation. And Eliza? He was quiet for a moment. I asked to speak to her directly. Her mother was reluctant. She agreed. What did you say to her? I told her the truth, he said, that I had been careless at the October dinner, and I understood, having seen how the situation appeared from her side, that she had formed an understanding I had not intended. That the failure was mine in not being clearer, in allowing my solicitor to have conversations I should have been having myself. That I was sorry, genuinely, for the position it had put her in. He paused. And that I was calling on someone, and intended to continue doing so. Beatrice was very still. How did she receive it? Better than I deserved, he said quietly. She was. She handled it with more grace than I had managed the situation that created it. She said she had suspected, since her mother had told her about you, that this was the correct shape of it. She said she appreciated the honesty. A pause. She also said that if Miss Holloway was the reason I had made up my mind, then she hoped Miss Holloway understood what she had. He met Beatrice's eyes. Those were her exact words. Beatrice breathed. She sounds, Beatrice said carefully, like someone worth knowing. She is, he agreed. I was careless with someone worth more than carelessness. I will not forget that. He paused. But I have done what needed doing. The matter is closed, actually closed, not closed through intermediaries. And I have something I want to ask you. She looked at him. Not yet, she said. He stopped. I need to say something first, she said. And I need you to hear it before you ask anything. All right. She folded her hands, unfolded them. This was, she had discovered, a more difficult speech to make than she had rehearsed. I have been the person who manages things for so long that I have confused managing with strength, she said. I hold everything at a slight distance because distance is how I have kept things from costing more than I had available. I told you that. I told you I was frightened of wanting something fully. She paused. While you were gone, Marcus came. He told me you had reconsidered. He delivered it with the specific satisfaction of someone who had been waiting for my confidence to be proven wrong. What did you tell him? I told him I trusted what I had seen, she said. That I had complete information, and I had made a decision with it, and I was not revising the decision because of his satisfaction. She looked at Adrian directly. I want you to know that I said that, and I meant it. I want you to know that I am not. I have not been sitting here in suspended judgment, waiting to see whether you came back before I decided what I thought of you. He was very still. I decided before you left, she said. I decided when you sat in that chair and described your own mistake accurately without making it smaller or asking me to help you carry it. I decided when you said you needed to correct it before you asked me anything else, because you would not ask me to stand on another woman's pain. She paused. I decided that you are the kind of man I thought you were. And I am done being careful about saying so. The silence that followed was different from all the ones before it. Warmer. Beatrice, he said, yes. I have been preparing what I wanted to ask you, he said. I had words arranged. I've been arranging them for 4 days. He paused. And now I'm going to say them differently. Because you just said something that changed the arrangement. Then say the different version, she said. He leaned forward. Not reaching, simply present, simply close, the distance between them, the minimum that courtesy required and no more. I want to marry you, he said, not because the situation suggests it. Not because it is the next logical step. Because you are the first person in 4 years who has made me feel like the quiet in my life was waiting for something rather than simply being empty. He paused. Because you told Marcus you trusted what you'd seen, and what you had seen was a man who made a mistake and owned it, and you trusted that more than his performance of certainty. And that is the kind of person I want beside me for the rest of my life. Another pause. Because when I was at Cavendish Hall doing something difficult and correct, the thing that kept me moving was knowing I was coming back here. The library was very quiet. The damaged shelves stood in their half-repaired state. Outside, the winter afternoon was going toward dark. She looked at him. She thought about her father's bookshelf. Books that change you. She thought about what he had said at the ball. The only person in the room I've decided to find interesting, and how she had thought then that it was confident. And she understood now that it had been something more than confident. It had been certain. He had been certain before she had been, and he had waited for her to arrive at the same place, and he had not pressured her, and had not performed certainty in order to convince her, only demonstrated it consistently until she could see it clearly. Yes, she said. He looked at her. Yes, she said again. Not as a decision reached after careful methodology. As a thing that is simply true, she held his gaze. I want to marry you. I have been wanting to marry you since approximately the second Thursday. When you picked up a brush and repaired a damaged spine without making a performance of helping me, and I told myself I was being premature, and I was not being premature. I was being accurate, and refusing to call it that, because accurate felt vulnerable. He exhaled the breath of 4 days of something large being released. That, he said, is the most honest acceptance I have ever heard. I told you I don't do the polished version, she said. You told me, he agreed, and the full smile arrived, the real one, the one that was nothing like his public face, the one she had been collecting and intended to keep collecting for the rest of her life. He reached across the table and took her hand, not a dramatic gesture, a specific one. The hand of someone who had been waiting to hold something and was now holding it and intended to continue. I need to speak to your estate manager, he said. About the East Wing shelves. She blinked. I beg your pardon. If I'm going to be spending time here before we can marry, I should finish what I started. He looked at the half-repaired shelves. Also the ledger. You said there were 3 errors last quarter. I want to find the pattern with you. She looked at him. You proposed marriage, she said, and now you're talking about bookshelves. I proposed marriage and you accepted, he said. The bookshelves were always part of the arrangement. His eyes were warm. I told you I wanted to be present, not at arm's length. I meant it then and I mean it now. She shook her head, not in disagreement, in something she couldn't quite contain. Graves is going to find this statistically improbable, she said. Graves already finds everything about this statistically improbable, he said. He will come around. When are you going to tell him? I sent him a letter from the road, he said, on the way back. She stared. You sent him a letter before I'd said yes. I sent him a letter saying I was going to ask, he said. Not that you'd agreed, he paused. Though I may have indicated that I believed the outcome was favorable. Your confidence, she said, is extraordinary. You told me the first verdict was favorable, he said. With room for amendment. I watched the amendment and concluded the trajectory was clear. He looked at her with the quiet certainty that was, she had decided, the most distinctly him thing about him. Was I wrong? She thought about every conversation. Every letter. The brush in the library. The hand over hers in the carriage. The way he had looked at her from across the ballroom. On the first night, curious, attentive, as though she was a question he had not yet answered and intended to. No, she said, you weren't wrong. Then the letter was appropriately timed, he said. She laughed, a real one, not a polished social laugh. The kind that surprised her on the way out. He looked at her when she laughed. He looked at her the way she had become accustomed to being looked at by him, fully, directly, with the specific attention of someone who was not cataloging or comparing, but simply seeing. Cecily is going to be insufferable, she said, when the laugh had settled. She is going to be right, he said, which is different. She'll say she knew from the ball. She did know from the ball, he said. She told me so on Saturday dinner, quite directly. She told you she knew, she said. And I am quoting that the answer had been obvious since the minute she heard what I said about crossing the room. He looked at her steadily. She was not wrong. Beatrice shook her head again. My family, she said, has no sense of appropriate timing. Your family, he said, is honest at inconvenient moments. I find it one of their most appealing qualities. He paused. I would like to meet your estate manager today, and I would like to speak to Cecily properly, not as a dinner guest, but as the person I am now before the end of the week. And I would like to have a conversation with your solicitor about the estate accounts, because 3 errors in a quarter means the system has a structural issue, not a calculation one. And structural issues respond better to architecture than arithmetic. She looked at him. You, she said, have been thinking about my ledgers. I have been thinking about your ledgers since you mentioned them on Saturday, he said. Among other things. What other things? He was quiet for a moment. About what a life looks like when both people in it are paying full attention, he said. When neither of them is performing comfort or managing from a distance. When the difficult things get said directly, and the quiet things are actual quiet, and not the absence of something that should be said. He paused. I have been thinking about what that looks like for a very long time. I stopped expecting to find it, and then you walked across a room toward me and apologized for being weaponized, and I thought, there it is. There is the thing I stopped expecting. She held his hand and looked at him, and thought about her father's shelf label again, the one she had always taken as a category for books. Books that change you. She thought it was a considerably broader category than she had understood when she was young. Mr. Vale, she said. Yes, the estate manager is in the east outbuilding at this hour, she said. If we go now, we can review the shelving requirements and be back before Cecily finishes her correspondence. He stood. He offered his hand, not formally, not as a courtesy, but as a gesture that had a specific meaning now, the meaning of someone who was present and intended to stay present. She took it. They went to find the estate manager, together, in the practical and unglamorous and entirely real way of 2 people who had decided that this was what they were doing and were doing it, and neither of them felt the need to make it more than it was. Because what it was turned out to be exactly enough. Graves arrived on a Tuesday. He had sent no warning, simply a letter the day before that said, I am coming to assess the situation in person as your descriptions have become progressively less reliable. Yours, Graves. Adrian had handed the letter to Beatrice across the breakfast table at Westmere, where she had been reviewing the corrected ledger system for the 3rd time since they had rebuilt it from the structural level up, and she had read it and said, he sounds exactly like you described him. He is considerably more alarming in person, Adrian said. I'm not alarmed by people, she said. I know, he said. That is what concerns me. Graves was 41, thin in the way of men who forgot to eat when they were thinking, and he had the expression of someone who had spent 20 years watching Adrian Vale make careful, controlled decisions, and had developed a finely calibrated sense of when something had changed. He walked into the Westmere drawing room where Beatrice was waiting, stopped, looked at her for approximately 4 seconds, and said, "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" she asked. "Someone who needed him," Graves said. "He tends to be drawn to situations that require his management." "I manage my own situations," she said. "Yes," Graves said with the tone of a man updating a hypothesis in real time. "I can see that." He sat down without being invited, which she registered as either rudeness or comfort and decided was the latter. "He told me in his letter that you fixed damaged bookshelves together on the second visit." "The third," she said. "The second was a carriage drive." He said second. "He is incorrect. The drive was Thursday. The library was Thursday week. I keep a more accurate timeline than he does." Graves was quiet for a moment. Then, with the smallest shift in his expression, "He's going to be very happy." "I intend that he should be," she said. "That is not the same as intending to make someone happy," Graves said. "Most people intend to make the people they love happy. You are describing something structural, a condition you are building, rather than a feeling you are hoping to sustain." She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "That's what I mean." Graves nodded once, with the decisive quality of someone closing a file. "Good," he said. "That is exactly the right thing." Adrian arrived from the estate office 20 minutes later, looked at the two of them sitting in evident conversation, and said, "You've already decided something." "We've already decided several things," Graves said. "Sit down. You're late." "I'm not late. You arrived unannounced." "I arrived when I said I would arrive." "You lost track of the time." Graves glanced at Beatrice. "He loses track of time when he's working. Does he do it here?" "Constantly," she said. "We've implemented a system." "What kind of system?" "I send the estate manager to find him at 4:30. He comes in for tea. It takes 10 minutes and prevents him from working through dinner, which he did 3 times the first week." Graves looked at Adrian. "She's implemented a system for you." "It's a functional system," Adrian said without defensiveness. "It's extraordinary," Graves said. He said it simply without irony. "I have been suggesting systems for 15 years. You have resisted everyone." "Her systems are better," Adrian said. Graves looked at Beatrice. "How did you do it?" "I didn't ask him to stop working," she said. "I asked the estate manager to find him. It's not a constraint on his behavior. It's a structural support for the outcome we both want." She paused. "He doesn't resist things that make sense. He resists things that feel like management." "Because he likes to be the one managing," Graves said. "Because he spent years being the only person managing anything, and accepting help felt like admitting failure." She looked at Adrian. "It isn't failure, it's architecture." Adrian met her eyes. "She says that a great deal," he told Graves. "Architecture versus arithmetic. She applies it to most problems." "She's right," Graves said. "She's been right about everything so far, based on a 15-minute conversation." He picked up his tea. "I approve, for what it's worth." "It's worth something," Adrian said quietly. "I know it is," Graves said. "That's why I came." The engagement was announced at the end of January, 6 weeks after the library, 4 days after Graves went home, with the expression of a man who had confirmed what he needed to confirm and considered his work complete. The announcement was made through the proper channels: the solicitor, the county notice, the formal letter to family, with the particular efficiency of Adrian Vale, doing something he had decided to do and doing it without unnecessary delay. Beatrice had reviewed the wording and suggested 2 changes, and he had accepted both without argument, which Cecily said was the most romantic thing she had heard all month. The responses arrived in waves. The first wave was warmth, genuine warmth, from people who had watched the ball and the subsequent weeks with the quiet satisfaction of people who enjoy seeing something go right. Lady Finchley wrote a lovely note. Lord Finchley's son Thomas, who was by now calling on Cecily with a frequency that had become its own kind of announcement, sent a brief and sincere congratulation that made Cecily read it 3 times. The second wave was more complicated, Mrs. Cavendish wrote. The letter was short, formal, and precise in the way of a woman who has decided to behave well despite having reasons not to. She wished them happiness. She said she hoped Miss Holloway, soon to be Duchess of Westmere, would find the position everything she expected. The word expected was doing a great deal of work in that sentence, and Beatrice read it twice and set it aside, and did not perform a reaction to it, because Mrs. Cavendish had lost something real, and was entitled to be precise about her congratulations. She wrote back. She thanked Mrs. Cavendish for her graciousness. She said she understood the letter had not been easy to write, and she respected the effort. She said nothing else. Adrian read her response before she sent it. "You could have said less," he said. "I know," she said. "But she behaved well when she didn't have to, and that deserves acknowledgement." He looked at her. "You are," he said, "going to be an extraordinarily good Duchess." "I'm going to be a competent one," she said. "Extraordinary seems premature." "It isn't," he said, "but I'll accept competent as a working description and let the rest develop." Marcus's response did not arrive. For 2 weeks, nothing came from him, no letter, no visit, no message through mutual acquaintances. Beatrice had expected something. She had prepared herself for something. The absence was, in its own way, more interesting than the thing would have been. He arrived on a Wednesday in February, not with the satisfaction he'd worn at his previous visits, that had been replaced by something quieter and considerably harder to read. He sat in the parlor and looked at his hands and said, "I owe you an apology." Beatrice waited. "I came here twice with the specific intention of making you doubt something true," he said. "I knew it was true. I could see what was in front of me. I told you it wasn't because—" He stopped. "Because your happiness is an inconvenience to the version of this family I have always imagined myself at the center of. And that is a contemptible reason." She looked at him. "Yes," she said, "it is." He looked up. He had expected her to soften it. "I'm not going to tell you it wasn't," she said. "It was. And it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise, and I've been done with dishonesty for some time now." She paused. "But I will tell you that I don't intend to carry it. You came here and said the true thing, which is harder than what you've been doing, and I'm choosing to let that matter." He was quiet. "I don't know what I expected from you," he said. "I know," she said. "You expected me to need something from you. I've never needed what you thought I needed." She held his gaze. "But I'm your cousin. That matters to me regardless of what you've done with it. Whether it matters to you is something you'll have to decide." He left without another word. She did not know what he would decide. She found, examining herself carefully, that she was genuinely uncertain rather than hopeful, or resigned, the specific uncertainty of a woman who has let go of the outcome without letting go of the care. She told Adrian that evening. He said, "How are you?" Not "What do you think he'll do?" Not "Was it difficult?" Just "How are you?" Steady, she said. It was the right conversation. "I'm glad it happened, so am I," he said. "For your sake, not his." "For both of us, a little," she said. He said something true. "That's not nothing." He looked at her. "You are," he said, "never going to stop seeing the best available version of a situation, are you?" "I see the accurate version," she said. "Sometimes those are the same thing." He pulled her hand toward him and held it, the gesture that had become, over the weeks, the most natural thing in the world between them. The small, specific warmth of two people who had decided to be present for each other and kept deciding it every day. "Graves sent a letter," he said. "What does it say?" "He says the announcement has been received well in London. He says Lady Hargrove told 3 different people at a dinner party last week that she had always thought you were remarkable." He paused. He says this with the irony it deserves. She thought about Lady Hargrove at the ball, the collected indifference, the "how terribly useful." She thought about the same woman saying "remarkable" to dinner parties. "People update," she said, "when they have better information." "Some of them," he said. "Most of them," she said. Given time and a reason, he looked at her with the quiet certainty that was the most distinctly him thing she knew. "Is that what you did?" he asked. "Given time and a reason?" "No," she said. "I looked clearly at the first available information and drew an accurate conclusion." She paused. "I was simply careful about acting on it." "Too careful," he said. "Sufficiently careful," she said. "I arrived, didn't I?" "You did," he said. "Eventually." The "eventually," she said, included 4 weeks of consistent evidence, 1 crisis competently handled, and the complete resolution of a situation that required your active effort. "I would argue the timeline was correct. I would argue," he said, "that I knew at the ball." "You knew you were interested at the ball," she said. "That is different, is it?" She thought about the chair. The gesture of it standing, moving, the public acknowledgement, of someone who had crossed a room toward him when everyone expected her to be sent away. She thought about standing in the cold with her hand in his, eye to eye, on the carriage step, the moment she had let herself see that something real was happening, and had chosen to keep walking toward it. "No," she said. "Perhaps not." He smiled. "The full one, the real one, the one that was entirely private and entirely his." The wedding was in April. It was not the enormous social production that his position technically warranted, because Beatrice had said, very directly, that she had no interest in performing happiness for 200 people she had met twice. And Adrian had agreed with the specific relief of a man who had been dreading the alternative. They had a morning ceremony, small and warm, with Cecily stand beside Beatrice and Graves standing beside Adrian, and the estate staff filling the back rows with the comfortable presence of people who had watched the house come back to life and were pleased to be there for the confirmation of it. Thomas Finchley sat next to Cecily during the ceremony and held her hand, which nobody officially commented on and everyone officially noticed. Beatrice wore her mother's dress, altered for the third time, and it fit better than anything she had ever worn. She had added nothing to it and removed nothing from it. It was the dress her mother had married in, and she was marrying in it, and the continuity of that felt like the right thing, and she was not going to explain it to anyone who needed it explained. Adrian looked at her when she walked in. He looked at her the way he had looked at her at the ball, at the carriage, in the library, across the breakfast table at the ledger, the full and direct attention of someone who was not performing seeing, but actually doing it. And she thought, yes, that is the thing. That is the specific thing I have been walking towards since the first night. The ceremony was short and correct, and neither of them stumbled over the words, because they had both read them in advance, and knew what they were agreeing to and meant all of it. Graves cried. He denied this afterward with complete conviction and zero credibility. Cecily did not cry, which surprised Beatrice until she realized that Cecily had not needed the ceremony to feel the conclusion of it. She had felt it in the library, probably, or in the carriage, or perhaps at the dinner party on Saturday, when Adrian had described the estate east wing with the specific affection of someone who had started to see a place as home again. They had a quiet wedding breakfast. The good cook from the Holloway estate had collaborated with the Westmere kitchen staff in a negotiation that Beatrice had deliberately not involved herself in. And the result was better than either kitchen would have managed alone, which she considered an early and promising precedent. Graves gave a toast that was 3 sentences long and contained 1 irony and 2 things that were simply true, which was the correct ratio for him. Cecily gave a toast that was considerably longer and made Adrian laugh twice, and Beatrice once, and the estate manager unexpectedly tear up, which no one had predicted. After the breakfast, after the guests had begun to disperse and the afternoon had gone golden, and the house had settled into the particular quiet of a day that has done everything it was supposed to do, Beatrice found herself standing in the East Wing library, the shelves fully repaired now, all 14 of them. Every spine straight and every volume returned to its proper place, in a system that she and Adrian had rebuilt together on a Wednesday afternoon that felt, looking back, like the actual beginning of everything. He found her there. He came in without announcing himself, which was how he moved through rooms now, without the deliberate management of his arrival, without the careful performance of not needing to be anywhere. He moved like a man who was in the right place and knew it. "Graves is looking for you," she said. "Graves is talking to Thomas Finchley about parliamentary procedure," he said. "He does not need me. He thinks he does. Graves always thinks he needs me," he said. "He is self-sufficient and has been for years. It is a habit of his to consult me about things he has already decided, and I have learned not to take the consulting personally." She looked at the repaired shelves. "We finished them," she said. "In February," he said. "You made a note of the completion date in the ledger." "I noted it as a completed project item." "You noted it," he said, "as East Wing Library restoration, complete. AV assisted. I read it when you weren't looking." She looked at him. "I didn't think you'd read that column." "I read everything you write," he said. "You are the most precise thinker I know. Reading your notes is educational. They're household accounts. They're a record of how you think," he said, "which I find consistently interesting." He moved to stand beside her, looking at the shelves, the way they had both looked at them so many times during the repair, not with satisfactions exactly, but with the particular feeling of something cared for and returned to usefulness. "I want to tell you something," she said. "Yes, when I sent you that note," she said. "The one that asked you to come after Mrs. Cavendish's letter. I was afraid that I had misjudged." "Not misjudged you, misjudged my ability to judge correctly. I have always trusted my own assessment. I have never been afraid that the assessment itself was wrong." She paused. "I was afraid that morning." He turned to look at her. "I want you to know that," she said, "because I have been very careful with you to be clear and direct and to say the true thing. And the true thing about that morning was that I was genuinely frightened. Not of what you would say, of what it would mean if I had been wrong about someone. I had looked at this carefully." He was quiet. "You weren't wrong," he said. "I know that now," she said. "I knew it when you walked in with the letter in your hand and I saw your face." She met his eyes. "I am telling you because I want you to understand what trust costs me. It costs more than it looks like from the outside. I give it with the same care I give everything, and when I give it completely—" She paused. "You have it completely. I want you to know what that means." He looked at her for a moment that had the weight of something being received carefully and held with the right amount of attention. Then he said, "I know what it means, do you?" "It means," he said, "that you are telling me something you would not tell someone who hadn't earned it. It means that you have been carrying the cost of that morning, quietly, the way you carry everything without putting it down on someone else's table, unless you are certain they'll treat it correctly." He paused. "And you are telling me because you have decided I will treat it correctly." She breathed. "Yes," she said. "I will," he said, not a promise performed. A simple declaration of something he had already decided and was merely confirming. "I will always treat it correctly. I will not always be perfect. You know that. You've already seen one significant failure, and I have no reason to believe it will be the last, because I am a person who moves through the world with certainty, and certainty produces blind spots." He held her gaze. "But I will always look at what you give me and hold it carefully. That I can promise without reservation." She thought about the ball, the crossed room, the chair pulled out, the man who had stood when every other choice available to him was easier. She thought about the carriage and the library and the ledger and the 4 days that had been the hardest test and the clearest answer. Thought about a woman who had spent years holding everything carefully because she had learned that careful was what the situation required, and who had finally found a situation that required something different. "Not careful, present. I was thinking," she said, "about the announcement. The one Marcus heard about, that you were calling on me. About how it started everything that happened after." "What about it?" "He thought he was setting something in motion that would end badly for me," she said. "He gathered information and used it, and he was absolutely certain of the outcome." He was wrong, she agreed. "But if he hadn't sent Mrs. Cavendish that information, if she hadn't written me that letter, you might not have gone to Cavendish Hall when you did. The situation might have drifted. The misunderstanding might have remained unresolved and become something larger later." She paused. "Marcus tried to break something and instead forced it into the shape it needed to be." He was quiet for a moment. "You are telling me," he said slowly, "that we owe something to Marcus?" "Not owe," she said. "Simply he did the wrong thing for the wrong reasons, and it produced the right result. I find that interesting, not satisfying, just interesting." "You," he said, "are a remarkable person. I told you at the ball I was returning a verdict," she said. "You still haven't given me yours." He looked at her. "My verdict on what?" "On me," she said. "You'd decided to find me interesting. You've never told me what you actually concluded." He was quiet for a moment that was entirely deliberate. "I concluded," he said, "that you are the most consistently honest person I have ever known. Not honest in the way of people who say difficult things and call it virtue. Honest in the way of someone who has decided that reality is more interesting than the version of it that would be easier to inhabit." He paused. "I concluded that you are brave in a way that doesn't look like bravery because you don't perform it. You crossed a room, you handed me a letter and watched my face. You said yes without the polished version. You told Marcus you trusted what you'd seen when the easier thing was to waver." Another pause. "I concluded that you are the person I wanted to become the rest of my life with. And that is not a conclusion I reached quickly or carelessly. It is one I reached accurately, which is the only kind I trust." She looked at him. She thought about her father's shelf. Books that change you. She had thought the first night that the conversation had felt like finding age she hadn't known was missing. She understood now that it was larger than that. It was not a page. It was the book itself, the one she had been reading for 26 years, without knowing it was incomplete, and had finally found the rest of. "Favorable," she said. He looked at her. "I beg your pardon?" "The verdict," she said, "substantially favorable." With considerable room for continued data collection, she held his gaze. "I intend to be very thorough." The full smile eyed the real one, the private one, the one that was entirely for her. "I intend," he said, "to give you every reason to continue." Outside, the April afternoon was warm and bright, the kind of spring day that arrives as a confirmation rather than a surprise, as if the world has made up its mind and wants you to know it. The Westmere Gardens were coming into something they had not been for years, not just maintained but alive. The specific aliveness of a place where someone has started paying attention again. Beatrice had noticed it the first week she came to stay. She had said nothing about it. It was not something that required comment. It was simply something that was true. The garden was changing because a man who had stopped tending things was tending them again, and the evidence of that was visible and quiet, and not meant to be admired. She had admired it anyway, the East Garden, she said. "The section near the old wall. What are you planting there?" He was quiet for a moment. "Roses," he said. She looked at him. "I started them in January," he said. "I wasn't certain they would take. I didn't mention it because..." He paused. "Because it seemed like something I needed to do without announcing it. Without it being observed, until I knew whether it was going to work." "Why roses?" "Because they take time," he said, "and they require attention. And if you do it correctly, if you are patient with them, they come back every year stronger than before." He met her eyes. "I thought that seemed appropriate." She looked at him for a long moment. "Are they taking?" she asked. "They are," he said. "I checked this morning." She thought about a man who planted roses in January, alone quietly, without announcing it, who had been doing things correctly and carefully, and without observation for long enough that the habit had become indistinguishable from character. She thought about what it meant that he was still doing it, even now. Still choosing the patient thing, still choosing the thing that required time and attention, and the willingness to come back to it every day. "I would like to see them," she said. "They are small still," he said. "They will be better in June." "I would like to see them now," she said. "Small," he looked at her. "Yes," he said. They went out together through the corridor and the east passage and the garden door, and he showed her the section near the old wall where the earth was darker, and the plants were exactly as he had described. Small, certain, not yet what they were going to be, but already unmistakably growing. She stood beside him and looked at them. She thought about everything that had led to this specific moment, the ball, and the crossed room, and the chair, and the carriage, and the letter, and the 4 days, and the library, and the ledger, and the wedding morning, and the East. Wing shelves and graves and Cecily and Marcus and Mrs. Cavendish and all the people, and decisions and honest conversations that had assembled themselves, over the course of one winter, into a life she had not known she was building, while she was building it. She thought about her father and his shelf labels. The specific, generous categories of a man who had believed that the most important thing you could do for a book or a person was to understand what kind of thing it was and treat it accordingly. She reached out and took Adrian's hand. He closed his fingers around hers without looking down, already certain of where she was. Already adjusted to her presence in the particular way of someone for whom that presence had become structural rather than additional. "Next June," she said, "they will be extraordinary." "They will," he agreed, "and the June after that," she said. "Better still." He turned to look at her, the full attention, the real face, nothing managed. "Yes," he said, "every year." She held his hand and looked at the small, certain roses and thought that this was what it felt like, not the dramatic version, not the performance of love, but the actual thing. The quiet of standing beside someone who had seen you clearly from the beginning and had decided, with full information and complete intent, that clearly was how they wanted to keep seeing you. She had crossed a room toward the most feared man in the county, and he had stood up, and she had sat in the best chair. And everything after that had to be the same, repeated in different forms. The decision to walk towards something real rather than stay safely at the edges of it. She had made that decision. She would keep making it every year.